The Joe Rogan begged to read the Bible. Okay, just stay with me because I'm going to make a case that in his latest podcast with Michael Easter, Joe Rogan makes some pretty interesting statements that has many of us who are followers of Jesus saying, is anybody going to tell him? Now, to be clear, it is no secret that we love covering Joe Rogan and any interactions he has with Christians on his podcast. This is mainly because of the stark contrast of his views changing about Christianity and specifically Jesus. Initially, Joe Rogan made statements like this.
Understand, because the New Testament is utter horse.
But as of late, he's been making more and more statements like this.
Like if you live life like there's a God, I feel like you can get a better result.
So while it does seem that Joe Rogan is slowly evolving towards Christianity, and some may even argue warming up to the ideas, more so in a utilitarian standpoint of what practical benefits does following Christianity have, he's still not all the way there. But in this video, we're going to go on to look at Joe Rogan attempting to explain something that I could only describe as a deeper desire to read the Bible. All right, so let's jump into this. This is from episode 239. Shout out to Michael Walker, who actually posted this on Twitter. Somebody tagged me in it. I thought this is great, right up our alley. Let's jump right into it.
You know, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this yesterday. We were talking about how complex the human mind is and how complex life and society is, but yet there's no real management book. Like
there's no real management book. Okay, there's an obvious elephant in the room we're going to get to if you watch till the very end. I'm going to walk you guys through multiple things from this management book, which is like the age-old trope, Christians, basic instructions before leaving Earth. We're going to get there, okay? But let's just hear Rogan out a bit more.
There's no document that shows you this is the optimal way to exist and these are the pitfalls of existing other ways that, you know, you have.
These are the pitfalls of existing other ways. We're going to look at this in just a moment, I promise you.
Have these human reward systems built in, and they can be hijacked by these various things. And this is the way the human body and the human mind exist optimally. And for whatever reason, there's no real structure that people can follow that's universally agreed upon. You know, like if you like...
No, there's obviously the 10 Commandments, all right? Believe it or not, I'm not going to go over those, but those 10 Commandments, we definitely all agree. Do not steal, do not lie, do not kill, right? Don't covet your neighbor's wife, which some might be like, that's stupid. Why would you not covet your neighbor's wife? Well, because comparison is the thief of joy. That's been proven by psychology. So there's the big 10, but we're going to go deeper on that in just a moment.
Say if you're a mechanic, right, and you're working on an engine, like there's very clear documents that show you like these are the pistons, this is the spark plug, this is the carburetor, if it's not clean it'll do this is the problem with the gas line and you have to fit it this way and that way, and so you do it all right and then boom, it starts up and it works and you can fix things that way and you can build things that way. We don't really have that for the most complex thing that we're aware of, which is human existence.
Oh man, this is amazing. We don't really have that for the most complex thing, which is human existence. We do though, Joe, we do. We're gonna go over it.
That's because it is so complex.
It's so complex.
And technology also changes very fast. So
okay, so they said it's so complex. All right, fair enough. So I'm gonna help you guys out. If there's any chance Rogan is seeing this, put together a little slide. All right. Yeah, I went to Keynote for this one. Let's look at this, okay? So first we got to open up with some of the most popular ones. If these aren't the building blocks of human flourishing and like guide rails for how to live life, we're going to go over the Proverbs real quick. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Why is the fear of God important? Well, because the fear of God gives humans something outside of this life to look at. You start having an eternal perspective. Jesus said, don't fear man, fear the one that can cast your soul into hell. So instantly, people just aren't living for the short term and whatever benefits them and might is right. They're thinking about the big picture because there's a God on the other end of that. Now, some people might say, oh, that's manipulative. Oh, that's counter to humans making the right decisions. But I think it's a great eternal perspective out. Now, we're going to get more and more specific with this as we go on. The next one, taking instructions leads to life. Proverbs 10:17, right? It's huge on counsel. Proverbs takes about heeding to different instructions. And ultimately, this leads to life. Money little by little grows. Proverbs 13:11. Instead of people desiring to get rich quick, which I'm sure Joe Rogan knows how detrimental that could be to human flourishing or humans just thriving in any industry, trying to get rich, trying to come up fast. Money little by little grows. There's a long-term view in the Proverbs about how to develop oneself and develop wealth, right? And in Proverbs 10:14 talks about how diligent hands lead to wealth. So a lot of what I would call our Protestant work ethic, this stuff comes from the Proverbs. It comes from a Judeo-Christian worldview, which a lot of is anchored in the Proverbs. Now, let's keep going on some more Proverbs. We have Proverbs 6:6-11. It talks about the ant and how the ant doesn't take any cues, but it knows to take its harvest and store some away, right? Don't be lazy. That's a huge one. And one of my favorite ones in Proverbs 6:6-11. Living on less than what you make. A lot of people's financial worries can be completely alleviated if they just learn to live on less than what they make. Proverbs 21:20 talks about that. The borrower is slave to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. Avoiding debt. Huge student loan crisis. Huge credit card crisis right now. A lot of people are going into debt, which increases their monthly overhead, making it harder and harder for them to, 1, get by, 2, to afford an emergency of any sort, 3, to get ahead, and 4, to potentially make shifts in their careers because they're so over leveraged. And Proverbs 16:18 talks about pride coming before destruction. Proverbs also talks about humility precedes honor. Before you want to have a position of honor, humility comes first. Jesus talks about when you're invited to a banquet, don't sit in a place of honor. Instead, sit in the back and then get asked to be moved up. So this idea of humility is all throughout the scriptures. Now, in the New Testament, specifically in the book of Galatians, it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. Those of us who are Christians, we believe that the Holy Spirit now dwells in us, okay? Which leads us to behave differently. And those attributes of Christians who behave differently are called the fruit of the Spirit. There's also the fruit of the flesh. But right now, I'm just going to talk about the fruit of the Spirit, which we all agree are good things, okay? So love, joy, peace, patience. These are all byproducts and virtues that the Christian promotes, okay? And we're going to go deeper on those, specifically on love in a moment here. Those who are in Christ Jesus are exemplified to have kindness in them, right? Goodness, faithfulness, being faithful to God, being faithful to your community, being faithful to your spouse. These are all fruit of the Spirit. Gentleness. Gentleness is not about being weak. Gentleness instead is about being strong and being able to be gentle with those who are weaker. So if me and my son are play fighting or he wants to wrestle me, which 8-year-old boys love to do with their father, I can hurt him, but I'm choosing to be gentle and allowing him to have fun with me and test those boundaries and test those physical limits, right? And the last one, which of course we know, is self-control. And self-control, or the ability to delay gratification, is at the root of every single person that is successful, is the ability to delay pleasure and choose purpose in the interim. So those are the fruit of the Spirit, those things that we believe that Christians have because they have the Spirit in them. Now let's go into some of the things that Jesus talked about. Now let's look at Jesus' commands. Love God with all your heart. Again, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. When you love God, you have an eternal perspective because there's someone outside of this world that then gives us an eternal perspective. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? This is a big one. A lot of people would say, hey, this is important to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus talks about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is the golden rule. A lot of people point back to this specific thing that Jesus said. Many people don't even know that these things came out of Jesus. Do unto others that you would have them do unto you. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. This is huge when it comes to integrity. This is huge when it comes to commitment. This is huge when it comes to punctuality. These are all from the words of Jesus. And the last one, which is one of the hardest ones, love your enemies. So those are the commandments of Jesus that we would all say are the very basics of having a great, flourishing life on this side of eternity. They are the manual. If people who don't even believe in Jesus were to live their life by the sayings of Jesus, they would benefit because of Jesus. That's how good God's wisdom is. Now, within that, if we talk about self-control, there are absolutely some things that we are to avoid. Jesus talks about how marriage is between one man and one woman. Jesus talks about how anyone who looks at a woman with lust in their eyes has committed adultery. So the Big 10 don't commit adultery. Jesus escalates that and says, even if you've lusted after a woman, you've committed adultery in your heart, right? Jesus says, if you hate someone, if you hate your brother, that you've committed murder in your heart. So the intent in the heart matters with Jesus. When we talk about sexual immorality, Paul goes on to explain that your body is not meant for sexual immorality. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 6, he goes on about all these things that the church in Corinth was dealing with and how we're not supposed to behave in such ways, right? And so those are some of the harsh things about following Jesus, that you do have a very specific design for how you are to honor God with your body. You have a specific design with how you are to honor God with your life. You have a specific design with how you are to honor God with your time, talent, and treasure. It talks about being generous and giving without compulsion. There's so much in the New Testament that is all about the virtue ethic, that is all about exactly what Joe Rogan says he wishes existed, which is a way to live your life. And it's better than just a way to live your life, friends, that the way to live your life is actually anchored on the way and the truth and the life, which is Jesus, who came, lived the life we couldn't live, died the death we should have died, on the cross, rose on the third day, and imputed his righteousness onto us who believe. And now we are reconciled with God. We are placed in a right standing with God because the issue of sin has to be dealt with. Ultimately, all of us are going to have to give an account for how we chose to live our lives, but it's Jesus' work on the cross that gives us access to heaven. And it's that same work on the cross that also transforms our heart so that we have the desire and the power to live the ways and the wisdom of God.